Now we are starting with the HTML basics. In this section, we go through a few basic HTML elements or tags. Then we will switch to CSS. As such, both CSS and HTML will go together. But still there are few HTML concepts and elements we need to know before we start the CSS and HTML together. So let's begin with understanding the HTML page structure first. This is how a basic HTML page structure looks. You might have seen this, or if you haven't, then don't worry, this is how it looks. This is how you define the HTML page structure, or you can say it as a basic HTML page skeleton. Let's break it down tag by tag so you can know what each tag does. First, we have the doc type, which tells the browser about the version of HTML. Currently, it says that we are using the HTML5, which is the latest version of the HTML. In fact, writing this doc type HTML means it is the HTML5 page. In the previous version, we had different syntax to define the versions. But nowadays, we don't worry about it. We simply write exclamation doc type and HTML, and that does the job. Remember, this is not an actual HTML tag. It's more like a comment which just tells the browser about the version we are using of HTML. It is essential to write this on the top of every HTML page you make. Next is the HTML tag itself. Now by giving these tags, whatever you write or code between these tags means that it will be part of your HTML page. It's more like a container to all the other HTML tags. That means our entire page will fall under the HTML tag. Next is the head tag. The head tag generally contains the document related information, that is metadata. Metadata is nothing but the collection of the data which describes the data. So the head tag is the data about the actual page. So it's not the page itself, but the information about the page. So we can include many special tags inside this head tag. We will see those as we move on, but at the moment, let's check this title tag. The title tag is used to define the title of the web page. So if I say here, for example, HTML page structure and check the browser, so you can see the title of the web page. Now it says HTML page structure. So this is what title tag is used for. The next tag is the body tag. Now the body tag is where you apply the actual content of the web page. Contents like text, images, comment box, checkbox, drop down list and whatnot. You will be applying most of your HTML tags here in the body when you are designing your web page. So you get the idea about how the tags are defined. You can define tags inside other tags, which you can see here that the title is defined inside head and all these tags are defined inside the HTML tag. To understand this more clearly, take a look at this tree structure of the HTML. Now if you add an h1 inside body, the tree structure will be updated like this. And if I add another h1 tag, they both will be on the same level of this tree. So this was the detailed information about the HTML structure and how you can define it. As a developer, writing all these tags in the first place can be very time consuming. So if you are using the VS Code, that is a shortcut for getting the HTML boilerplate code. Let me show you. I'll remove all these tags. So we have blank screen now. Now if I press exclamation and enter, you can see that now we have the whole HTML structure defined by pressing one single key. Let's talk about relative questions. So the relative question is, why do we need to specify doc type HTML at the beginning of the page? So as I have mentioned earlier that doc type HTML is used to specify the version of the HTML to your browser. Currently HTML5 is the latest version available and that we are using here. So it's essential to define the version of your HTML to your browser when defining the code. In this lecture, I am discussing about the paragraph tag. This tag is mainly used to write text messages which can be in paragraph format or even in a single line format. It not only takes text messages but also allows you to wrap an image URL or maybe any other URL inside the paragraph tag. But there is a proper way to do that, which we will see as we move along. Let me show you a simple example here. Inside body, I will give the paragraph, and you can see when I give the paragraph tag, it closes the paragraph tag as well. So it is mandatory to define the end of paragraph. Now let me define some sample text. I'm just pasting some text here and let's check the browser. So the paragraph is being displayed inside this HTML document. Now, by default, the paragraph tag has its own set of attributes on how it's going to look in the document, unless the programmer wants to change them with their choices of attributes. I will show you what I mean. If I give another paragraph here, which is right next to the end of first paragraph, and I am not separating these texts to the new line, I'll keep the paragraph in single line, right? Now if we check the browser, you can see that the paragraph is by default divided in different lines. So this is what paragraph tag does, or rather this is how the functionality of paragraph tag is. So even if I press enter here and also if add some white spaces in between, you can see that it says the same. So if you give extra spaces or extra lines inside paragraph tag, the browser counts those extra spaces and lines as a single one. So it will get removed and the paragraph stays as it is. That means it's meaningless to give extra white spaces or extra lines to the text while using the paragraph tag. Notice that it also adds a single blank line before the new paragraph begins, hence dividing the two paragraphs. So this is how you can work with the paragraph tag, and often we see putting paragraph is a very common practice in any web page you observe. Now let's talk about relative questions. So the first question is, what is the purpose of giving paragraph tag inside HTML document? Well, the paragraph tag is used to define a paragraph inside HTML document, and also it is mandatory to define the paragraph between these two tags. That is, it should have the start and the end of the tag. There are a few tags where you do not need the end of the tag, which I will discuss in the forthcoming sections, as those tags are called as empty tags. The second question is, what will happen if you try to give white spaces and extra lines inside the paragraph tag? If you try to give extra spaces, that is white spaces and extra lines to the paragraph while in p tag, then those spaces and lines will get removed by the web browser while displaying that paragraph, as the p tag is tend to perform that way. So it's meaningless to give white spaces and extra lines inside a single paragraph tag. In this lecture, I will be discussing about tag, empty tag, and element. Let's begin with tag. A tag is an HTML language keyword or command which gives instructions to the browser page. For example, we have seen the paragraph, that is the p tag, which instructs the browser to make a paragraph on the web page. There are various tags available in HTML which are used to define the content of the web page. For example, inside body, you can see I have defined paragraph and h1 and I have wrapped them inside the div. So what are those? All these are known as tags. So this p is a tag, h1 is a tag, and div is also a tag. In HTML, a tag contains three main parts: opening the tag, content inside the tag, and finally closing the tag. Now looking at this structure, tags can be content for other tags too. So this paragraph and h1 works as contents inside the div tag. Let's define the content inside paragraph and h1. I will say here lorem and press enter so you can see the dummy text gets written here. In HTML5, that is the latest version of HTML, and inside the VS Code which I am using right now, it provides a functionality to give dummy text just by writing the lorem keyword. Anyway, in the h1 I will write a message saying hello. As you can see in the browser, the paragraph and the message is displayed. Every HTML tag is also called as an element. Now there are also some tags which do not have content. So for example, let me put an HR tag here. HR stands for horizontal rule, which creates a horizontal line on the page. Let's check the output. So you can see the horizontal line created by the HR tag, which divides the paragraph and h1. The standard practice is that when we don't have a closing tag, we use tag with a slash inside the angle bracket itself, like this one. This is called as self-closing. So here as such there is no error, but still you should close this HR tag this way. Let us look at one more empty tag known as BR, that is the break tag or new line. So let's say I want to give new line after this sentence. So I will give BR here and let me add few more break tags inside these paragraphs. Let's check the output now. So you can see that we have now added some new lines by giving the BR, that is the break tag. So the tag in which we do not have content and doesn't need an end or closing tag is called as an empty tag. Because there is no content, it is the empty tag. Other tags which do not need closing tags are meta, link, img, that is the image tag. So this is what a tag and element is in HTML. Now let's talk about relative questions. So the first question is, what is a tag in HTML? And is it necessary to close all the tags when used? Well, a tag is an HTML language keyword or command which gives instructions to the browser, and it is necessary to close the tag as long as that tag contains the content defined in it. But when it comes to empty tags, they do not have the closing tag. And that's the second question. What is an empty tag? A tag which does not have any content in between, so you can say that it is empty content, and that's why they are called as empty tags. Also, when we do not have the closing tag, we try to self-close these tags with the syntax like HR and BR we have already seen in the example. Now let's talk about attributes in HTML. So the attributes are special words which can be used to define additional information to the elements or tags. Generally, they are used to define the behavior of the elements. Let me show you an example of attribute named style. For example, I want to color the text of this paragraph. So here in the paragraph, I will put a space and will say style equals to, and I will open the double quotes so you can see the various styling options it shows. Now I will say color colon red. Let's save this and let's check the output. So you can see that the paragraph is in the red color. You can also add color to this HR here as well. So let's do that again. I will say style here and color property and giving the color. So now the color of this HR is changed. You can add many properties to a single element with the help of style attribute. We will be having a dedicated lecture about style attribute in the forthcoming section. Right now, our focus is to understand the term attribute. The other few important attributes which are used widely are ID, class, href, src, etc. We will be going through all these attributes as we move ahead with the tutorial. You can also have multiple attributes applied on a single element. Like earlier, we have just seen that there is a paragraph and the color is applied with a style attribute. So style is the single attribute. But let me first of all show you the syntax. You have the tag name, then the attribute equals to value, then you have a space to have a separation between two or more attributes. So space is the separator. So space again attribute is equal to value and so on. Let's practically see one. Here in this paragraph, I'm just going to say style is equal to color red, and now I'm going to give ID is equal to para, that is paragraph. So this is just an ID of this paragraph. Of course, this ID will not be of any use at the moment, but you can get the idea. This is how you can apply multiple attributes to a single element. Let's talk about relative questions. So the first question is, what are attributes and how can you define them? Attributes basically change the behavior of the element. Whenever you want to modify the characteristics of the element, you can use attributes. The second question is, how can you apply multiple attributes to a single element? So here is the syntax. You have the tag name, you have the attribute, you keep on writing the attribute, each attribute separated by a space, and the values are always covered in double quotes. To make sure you follow these standards, and this is how you can apply the multiple attributes. In this lecture, I will be discussing about two most important tags, that is the div tag and the span tag. The div tag is used to define a division that creates a section in an HTML document. So if you want to put contents like navigation bar, images, text, and much more, you can insert them inside division with ease. As we move ahead with some practical designs, you will understand the importance of the div tag. Also, it works as a container for different HTML elements. Let's look at the syntax of div tag. So looking at this example, I have defined two divisions here in this format. Now let's take a look at the browser and let me press the inspect here. So you can see the code which we have defined is displayed here. Now if I roll over the mouse to the first div, you can see it focuses on the area which that div covers. So you can see the second div is inside the first div. Now if I roll over the mouse on second div, you can see it focuses on the area covered by that division. This is what div tag does. It creates a division or a section in the web document, and then you can use that division as a container for other elements as well. Let's talk about the span tag now. The span tag is much like division, but span is used to deal with the part of a text. For example, let's say I want to color this text CSS only. So I'm just going to put a span around the CSS. I'll say span style is equal to color colon red, and I'm going to end the span here. Now if you look at the output, you can see that the word CSS is now in red color. Now the important question here is, then what is the difference between div and span? And to understand this, let me just change this span to div and let's see the output. As you can see, div has entered a new line, that is a block with new line. So div is called as block element, whereas span is an inline element. And the reason is, when you want to format just few words and you do not want it to disturb, then you use the span tag because span does not insert any extra space or extra line, nothing. It just is there silently performing the operation. I hope this gives you clear idea about div and span. Certainly we are going to use it often in the forthcoming sections with practical designs, so this will be more clear with practical implementations. Now let's talk about relative questions. So the question is, what is the difference between div and span? So as I mentioned, div is a block line element. That means it is going to create a block and going to enter a new line, whereas the span tag doesn't add any line, any white space. It is just there, and if you want to style or you want to apply some formatting to words, then span is the tag which you would be using. In this lecture, I will be talking about the HTML heading tags. Heading tags are generally used to define heading inside the web page. There are 6 different heading tags available which are used to define headings inside HTML document. That is H1, H2 to H6. So we have H1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. When it comes to giving a heading inside HTML document, each of them has their own different purpose. Consider this example here. I have defined the heading tags here with a message to be displayed as heading on the web page. Let's take a look at the output. As you can see, the difference between all these headings is quite visible. The H1 tag is used to define the most important heading in the HTML document, and it also has the size much greater than the rest of the headings as well. Generally, we see that H1 is used only for the main title, so we don't see H1 repetitively used in a web page. H2 is used to give the second most important heading inside the HTML document. H3 to H5 heading tags are generally used to define any subtopics or less important things inside the HTML document. And if you want a text or even a sentence to be highlighted, H6 tag is useful in that case. But mainly you see that the heading tags are used for giving headings only. The heading tags can also be used with nested elements, like here in the code I have nested the H2 and H3 tags inside the div tag. As we move ahead with more practical examples, we will see H1 to H6 tags are used often at various places. The one relative question one can think of is that in which case you will use H1 or maybe H2 or H6. So I've already mentioned that when it comes to highlighting a topic, H1 gives the biggest size for the font. You also have other ways to highlight text, but H1 is one of the tag which is provided by HTML, which you can directly use to give a main title. As long as H2 or H3 tags are concerned, looking at the output you can make out at what place you will need in your web page design. Now we are going to understand the unordered list tag in HTML. In HTML, list tags are used to display the information in the form of lists. The unordered and ordered list tags are used when you want to display a list of information in HTML document. These are the two most used list tags in HTML. Let's start with UL tag. This tag is also called as an unordered list tag. As the name says, this tag is used to display the items which are not in orderly format, that is, displaying just the random list of information with bullets. So for example, here in the code, let's say I want to define the unordered list. I will say the UL tag, and this will define the unordered list inside your HTML document. Now to define the items inside the tag, we use the li tag, which represents the list item inside the tag. You cannot write the items without giving the li tag inside the list. So let me define few list items. Li's should always be written inside their parent element, that is in this case the ul tag. So now let me say li here. The first is the paragraph tag. Let me copy and paste this multiple times, and let me change the text. Span and div tag, attributes, anchor tag, empty tags and elements. That's it. Now let me just save this, and here you see. So this is how the list items are displayed with the ul tag. Now by default the items are displayed in bulleted format, but you can change the bullet types as well. You just need to write type attribute after the ul tag. Let's say I want to display the items with circular disk bullets. For that I will say type equal to circle. Let me just save, and now you see that bullet type is changed. The type attribute allows 4 bullet types, which are disk, circle, square and none. Let's check them practically. I'll say disk as a type instead of circle. Looking at the output, you can say that the disk type is the default bullet, which will be displayed when type attribute is not specified. Now let's see the square attribute type. I'll give square here, and now you see in the output that we have the square bullet displayed with each list item. And lastly, the none as bullet type, and now you see that there is no bullet given to any of the list item. So that's pretty much the unordered list tag offers. Now let's talk about a relative question. The question is, how will you change the bullets in an unordered list? So as discussed, we have the type attribute and we have 4 types of values here: the disk, the circle, the square and none, and which we have seen practically. So this is how you change the bullet type. Now let's talk about the ordered list tag, that is the OL tag. The OL tag is used to display the list items in orderly format, that is in numbered format. It follows the same syntax like seen in UL tag. The only difference is that you have to define the OL, that is ordered list, instead of UL, that is unordered list. So let's change this here and let's check the output. So you can see the items are displayed in the numeric format. Just like UL, we can change the type of numerical order. By default, the order will start with 1, but if I want to change the numeric format to, let's say, Roman numerals, I can do that by saying type is equal to uppercase I. Let's do this and save, and you can see the order is displayed in Roman numerals. The OL allows us 5 different ordered formats, which are 1, lowercase I, uppercase A and lowercase a. Let's check them practically. I will give lowercase I first, and let's go back to the output, and you see that it's a Roman numerals, but they are in the lowercase. If you want to display the list in alphabetical order, then you can say uppercase A. So let's do that here, and we save it. Let's check the output. So you see that now the ordered is with A, B, C, D and so on. And to display the list in lowercase alphabetical order, you simply use the lowercase a instead of this uppercase A. Let's save this and again check the output. So you have the list here with the lowercase alphabets. We can also display the items starting from a certain numeric or alphabetical value as well. You have seen that it is starting with 1 or A only, but that can also be changed. So if I change the type here, and let's say I want this order to be displayed from 6th place for this type, I will say start attribute and will give 6 here. Let's save. So you can see that the list started from the 6th position. Not only that, you can also display this numeric alphabetical values in reverse order. For that, I will simply give reversed attribute here. And let's check the output. And you can see the numeric values are now in reverse order. Remember, it won't change the content in reverse order, but it will just change the numeric or alphabetical values for the OL tag. You can also create a nested list using the list tag. Consider this example here, where we have the UL as the main container in which there is an LI, and further it has the OL, that is order list, and there are multiple list items and order lists inside the main UL container. Let's check the output. So this is how you can work with the HTML list tags. Let's talk about relative questions. The first question is explain the difference between ordered and unordered list. So it is the OL and UL tag. OL gives numbers to every list item, whereas unordered list will show items with bullets only. The second question is how will you display the ordered list in reverse order? It is this reversed attribute, as we have seen in this example, which reverses the number or the alphabetical sequence. Let me also remind you that it doesn't change the content, it is just the number, it is just the numeric or alphabetical arrangement which is changed. The list item which you have given remains as it is. And the last question is it possible to set the starting number in an ordered list? Well, yes, certainly. Not necessary. By default, it starts with 1 or maybe A. But if you want to start it with, let's say, 5 or maybe 6, like we have seen in this example, you can certainly do that by using the start attribute. This lecture is about the anchor tag. So an anchor tag is used to define a hyperlink which links from one page to another. Let me show you what I mean. I will open Google and let's say I want to search learn maths. So all these items which you can see are actually hyperlinks. Let me inspect them so you can understand it much better. You can see when I roll over the mouse on the link, it displays A, which is an anchor tag. Here also it shows anchor tag when I roll over the mouse. Even the menu items here like all, images, news are all hyperlinks. So if you want to give hyperlink in your HTML document which connects other web pages, the anchor tag is used. This is the syntax of the anchor tag. We define the link by giving A, that is the anchor, then the href attribute to define the link path, address or URL, whatever you call it, of any web page, a file which you want to open on click of that link. Href stands for hypertext reference, which takes the address, path or URL of a web page or a file which is displayed as a link in the HTML document. Let's see an example. I will give anchor tag here, and in the href I will give a link of an HTML page which contains the message. So this is the file. Back to index.html. We'll give the file name here in the href. Let me give the link name as well. Alright, that's it. This is how you can define a link. Let's check the browser. You can see the link is being displayed. Now if I click it, you can see it redirects to the message page. Right now it redirects the display file on the same window But what if you want to display the message or give a link which opens in the new window? For that, there is an attribute called target, which is used with the href attribute inside the anchor tag. The target attribute specifies where to open the linked document. So let me give target here and I will say underscore blank. This will open the link in the new window. Now if I click on the link, you can see it opens a new window to display the message. You can use the anchor tag in many ways, like here. I have nested the anchor tag within the paragraph tag. You can use anchor tag to link an image, an audio file, or even a video file as long as the path is valid. Anchor tag is the most important tag when it comes to implementing menus. All the menu items are defined inside list items and each list item wraps an anchor tag. As we proceed further with real world designs, you will see anchor tag as a key tag. Anyway, now let's talk about few relative questions. So the first question is, explain the practical purpose of anchor tag. As I mentioned, anchor tag is the tag which helps you to create menu items or menus on your web page, and it's going to be used extensively for user interface or user interaction through menu items. The second question is, how can you view the link in the new window? Well, as we already discussed, the target is the attribute. If you specify with the blank value, it's going to open the link in a new window. We have learned about the anchor tags, but there is an advanced concept which is worth knowing. So the majority of internal and external domain linking is achieved by using the HTML anchor tag. In anchor tag, there is an href attribute which is used to state the link's destination. Well, the very use of the links are that they take you somewhere inside the web browser. Normally, we see various types of links given to the href. But do you know why these links begin with hash or only has hash as a link reference? Basically, the hash in the href refers to the unique HTML element ID to which the window, that is the browser, should be scrolled. For example, if you define an element like this where I give the division with ID show and inside I define a paragraph. I'll define the anchor tag giving href as hash show, that is the ID of this division. So when I click on the link, it will target the ID which has been given inside the href. As you can see here, it refers to the ID of the element. So basically the hash in the href will target the element ID available in the current page. Now what if you give only the hash inside href? The href hash doesn't specify any ID name, but it does have a corresponding location on the page, which is basically the top of the page. So I'll make few changes here. I'll bring the anchor tag below this division, and also let me apply CSS to bring the link at the bottom of the page. I'll just give margin to the div. Let's check the browser. I'll scroll down to the bottom and you can see the link here. Let me click this and you can see it brings the page to top again. So when there is no ID to the target, it goes nowhere. That means it is going to go on top. It will scroll to the top of the page. And that generates one more relative question, that is, how will you create a link which scrolls to the top of the current page? So now you already know how to do that. I'll create a link first, then I'll give a division, and inside division I give heading, for example, and in CSS I'll add margin to this division so that the link goes to the bottom of the page. That's one way to do it. There are various other ways you can perform for achieving the same task. Now in the browser, you can see the heading. I'll scroll down to the bottom of the page and will click the link, and you see that it comes back to the top.